ahead and get started with the budget hearing for neighborhood business development. We have Councilor Hogan, Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Peniagua, Councilor Green, President Hudson, Councilor Schultz, and myself, Councilor Allen. If you want to introduce your team, and then you can just go into your presentation, that'll be good.
Great, thank you, Councilor. So Michael Collins, Commissioner of the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. To my left, I have Deputy Commissioner Michelle Skapansky. To my right, Deputy Commissioner Eric Ennis. And we also have our Finance Director, Jackie Duong, with us as well. So you've got the budget book in front of you. We just also passed out a one-pager just to give you an idea of the fiscal work that doesn't show within the budget. So we'll touch on that within a minute. Wanted to provide some highlights. Then we'll take a look at that handout, and we can take a look at the budget. So overall, when you look at the work of the department, we're really fortunate in the fact that we work so closely with many of you. Whenever you reach out to a constituent concern, opportunity for investments, something you guys come across yourself that's a concern within the neighborhoods regarding businesses, housing, any of that type of stuff. So we are a really unique department in the fact that if you live, work, or invest in the city of Syracuse and you're going to interact with city government, it's most likely through our department in one way or another. And that diversity means that we get to do a lot of cool stuff. One of the things that we do by right is the entitlement dollars that come to us through HUD. So that's the Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Solutions Grant, home program, the action plan that you guys have in front of you right now for the next council agenda. That's approximately $7 million annually. For those of you that have been doing this for a long time, you know that's an amount that stabilized in the last couple of years, but used to be several times that back in the day. So critical work related to keeping people in their homes and being able to support all things.
Commentary on that. I think because Pat would know, he was here, I wasn't. But I think because that money was so flowing so well that people have come to expect that. And so because the amounts are lower than they had ever been, so people are screaming and crying and saying, well, why can't you do this? Because you used to. Well, we used to have land and honey, and we don't have that anymore. Right. What was the total CDBG before they started cutting? It was up.
I believe I don't have that exact number in front of us, but I believe it was most likely roughly three times what we have right now in total allocation between the three grants.
Right, and now we're down to what, 7? Now
so 7 for all of them, 5 million simply for CDBG. So yeah. And forgive me for not recognizing Deputy Mayor, my boss. So glad you're here then. So again, we've got that. There's the $4 million HUD grant that we do for healthy homes that's specific to lead remediation. We'll have in front of you soon the ARPA allocation for another several $1 million specific to lead, both on the enforcement side and the remediation side. For the CARES Act grants that came to us through CDBG and ESG. So there were 2 CDBG CVs, 2 ESG CVs. They totaled $4.6 million for CDBG and $3.2 million for ESG over 2 years. So we have handled that in the current fiscal year. The last fiscal year, it'll wrap up in the beginning of the next fiscal year for that nearly $8 million.
And you know me, got to ask another question. So since you're going to be taking on more for the lead, are you going to have enough staff to?
So excellent question, and we'll talk in detail about that when we bring the proposal in front of you. What I would say is that the staffing before was at 80%. It's now 100%. We have more assistance actually because of what happened within the codes department in the fact that they've expanded what they're doing, so that there's we've got an internal team to coordinate with. The actual work, however, is still done with the in concert with the county, because the county does all the bidding process and contracting with the contractors that we
I'm more
approve.
interested in the enforcement. Are you gonna have staff to do the enforcement of it?
So that'll show up in the codes budget that we'll discuss tomorrow. And yes, Director Dishaw will get into what that looks like, but all the staff, all of his inspectors have been or are in process right now of being trained up to be able to do the enforcement. And we're also looking at, within that ARPA allocation that we'll bring to you, the technology that'll allow us to be exceptionally efficient.
We can throw money, but if we can't really follow up with enforcement, then we're defeating the purpose.
So when Deputy Commissioner Skapansky and and Director Dishaw created the new maps for the deployment of the teams, the inspector teams, one of the things that worked out well is that every inspector team at least has one part of the areas that are defined within the ordinance for enforcement. So what that means is that we've got now 14 inspectors on staff that are getting trained up to be able to do that work. Yeah, and honestly, the staffing levels were a problem, not necessarily because of what was budgeted, but simply being able to identify the right people, and we've got that now.
With the tablets and the technology.
Just code enforcement in general, for the inspectors. Yeah. Other questions on that? Okay. So other highlights, I really go to that graph that's in front of you. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the amount of work that is done by this staff. The easiest way to quantify it is always with in dollars. That doesn't show up within the budget. So when we get into the budget numbers, what you'll see is the yellow bar that you've got that looks like this much. That's how much money we spend on personnel to do what you see in blue and a little bit lighter color above it in overall work between the HUD grants, foundation grants, ARPA allocations, but I will tell you we're about 25,000 a person over the 31 people within the department that it comes out of the city budget to do that amount of work. We're looking at about $29 million worth of work annually for what's not even included in the budget. So I would make the case that we are the best value you're going to find in any government for what you guys get out of for taxpayer dollars. Some of the programs that we've talked recently about, the Financial Empowerment Center program, which has eliminated millions in debt, created $1 million in savings. We had a great flag raising yesterday, and Councilor Allen is there wearing two hats. The service that program does is life-changing for the people that participate in it. I will tell you, I participate in it. I am someone that has the joy of putting twins through college right now, and so having a financial counselor, as we figure that out, is something I was not going to pass on. But we also have a counselor over at Department of Social Services, so it's really the full range that's available for city residents on that. Neighborhood Ambassador Program, Michelle has talked to all of you about that as we did a recent allocation. You guys got a great chance to understand that. Frankly, the Liberty Resources contract that was just approved, that started out of the work that we did with those CDBG-CV allocations on making sure that people that were on the street because of COVID, not because they were homeless, but because of their mental health reasons, that they had the right outreach. And look what that's growing into now. But that's the type of stuff that's able to happen out of our department. Is we're able to. The ambassador program is new. It's now something that we're being asked to speak on nationally. The Liberty program, you guys know really well, and frankly, the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative work, the infill housing, where we're finally able to go back and build new houses where we had previous years done demolitions. All of the great work that Deputy Commissioner Ennis has done when it comes to economic development in those areas, it's really cool. I want to take a minute and see if there's any questions we've got on this sheet and then I was going to turn it over to Eric to be able to go through some of what we see within the budget book. All right, so we're all agreed we're great value, right? And that's basically where we're at. All right, great. It's hard to, yeah. So that being said, what I'd like to do right now is turn it over to Eric, so we can talk about the business development activity indicators that are in the book.
All right, good afternoon, counselors. So just to direct you to page 131 is where you'll find these activity indicators. I was going to handle the business development side. Michelle will handle neighborhood development, half of the department. But just to briefly introduce, what the work happening within business development is within this department, it's really a number of different pillars. The first one is really going to be financial assistance to small businesses directly, as well as real estate development projects. So we do that through a couple different ways and different authorities that are staffed out of our office. The first one is SEDCO, the Syracuse Economic Development Corporation. That is essentially the city's revolving loan fund, especially in recent years due to COVID-19. We've also taken on a grant-making portion to support and assist small businesses, and that effort continues now with the recent funding through ARPA. SIDA provides, the Syracuse Industrial Development Agency is providing tax abatements to real estate projects and investment here within the city to leverage additional development and growth. And then additionally, our staff and our team are constantly working on assisting entrepreneurs with a project they might be undertaking with the permit office, helping them navigate that process and making sure everyone's speaking the same language on how to get their approvals done. We're also providing direct support. So if we ultimately are not the best equipped to work on a business plan or help an entrepreneur on the next steps with growing their business or launching their business, we're going to refer them to partners like the Small Business Development Center, like SCORE, like Center State CEO. So oftentimes we're kind of a matchmaker as well for different entrepreneurs here within the city. And then the final piece is that we put a lot of effort as well into strategic planning and looking at different resources that can help advance economic development, particularly on business corridors. That's a big emphasis in this budget that you'll see, but also a big emphasis for our office. Recent allocations from the state, like Downtown Revitalization Initiative, or DRI, focusing on efforts on our business corridor planning when we undertook the study that was recently done within the last 2 years with Camoin Associates. So really have a data-driven approach to business development within our corridors. And then I think as we really look at the recent indicators, and I think that's where I'll kind of touch upon some of these, really to speak to the construction and economic development activity in recent years. We've been able to hold those numbers extremely steady, coming kind of moving past COVID or what the future looks like under COVID. We're seeing record-breaking construction and development activity. So what you'll see is that number, our estimate this year for building permit construction value is $275 million. We're projecting to exceed that number this fiscal year. And so heading into the next fiscal year, we wanted to hold that number steady at approximately $275 million. But this is certainly, I think, we saw a decrease in this activity at the height of the pandemic because of so much uncertainty. But even in the midst of surging construction prices and construction values on materials, we still continue to see development taking place throughout the city. And that's something that our office works very closely with the Central Permit Office and with Jake and Medea to be able to see those projects through to fruition. As well as pre-development meetings, I think most of the councils are aware of these, but it's a great opportunity to basically bring a project and a proposal and a design team in a room with all city staff. And over the last 2 years, it's been a virtual room through WebEx, but we've held steady at approximately 35 pre-development meetings per year, so somewhere between 30 and 35 that take place. And the goal of these meetings is that by the time you come out of it, you have a great understanding of the comments, concerns, code path, the right kind of things that you need so that when you formally go to submit your building plans, we're trying to eliminate those hurdles and remove those hurdles ahead of time.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what's the requirements for the pre-development meetings? Because I know, I see some projects that happen around here, but you can tell there's not really that much planning that goes into place. So is it a threshold on as far as like the size of the project or the location of the project? Like, how do you guys determine which ones need a pre-development meeting?
It's a good question. So pre-developments are not required, but they are strongly encouraged depending on the size and scale. What we typically will say, because there's no dollar threshold that we're setting that at, but what we're doing is we're encouraging, if there is a conceptual site plan and conceptual building plans, if you feel like you have questions going into that or your architect has some questions, then we would encourage you to take advantage of the pre-development. It's a service that we provide and we can schedule it really typically in less than 1 to 2 weeks. But because it is not required, the intake meetings that are happening, and I know that Codes is going to be able to speak to this in their budget tomorrow, but we've looked to really create a process so that if there's any questions or if we can be transparent about what you're going to need to revise with your building plans, we're looking to do that ahead of time. The pre-development is just a proactive way to
Okay.
address that in the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
So, that kind of covers, again, pre-development as well as permit construction activity. I mentioned and made reference to SITA. So these are the projects that have been formally induced and have secured and closed with receiving tax abatements. So that number right now that we have projected as an estimate for this current fiscal year is 7. Looking based on kind of our just forecasting, we're looking at that number to be about the same with 8 for next year. But the project-induced value, that's something where we're taking the total development of the total cost of the abatements and the total benefits that each project is receiving. That estimate right now is approximately 86 million. So, and I'm sorry, these are total development costs based on the projects that are being supported by SITA. But our projection is, again, that number will hold steady, hold firm around 90 million. This is all just based on forecasting to the best of our ability. Again, it's incumbent on the project teams to ultimately bring a project to SITA and to our board of directors. But as we made reference to, there's development happening throughout the city. So our projection is that SITA will continue to stay busy. And so the last piece is SEDCO. And this is, SEDCO has taken on such a huge instrumental role, especially in the wake of the pandemic. We worked very hard to provide direct financial assistance to businesses in the forms of grants, as well as emergency loans. Within about 2 weeks of the pandemic hitting in March of 2020, businesses were receiving financial assistance because of how much uncertainty we had at the time when we started the pandemic. Since that time, we have allocated to date $3.8 million in total assistance and awards to small businesses throughout the city, and that is since March of 2020. We've assisted over 190 businesses, and that number continues to grow. Month after month, we continue to be reviewing and supporting businesses through the ARPA-funded programs that were authorized by council. One of the things I will just point out when you look at these numbers, specifically around the total value of these loans, one of the projects that we talked about at length with the council was the Landmark Theater. It was one of the very first projects. It was one of the very first things that we successfully completed with ARPA. That was a $1.8 million allocation from the council to SEDCO. And I'm pleased to say the seats are fully replaced. The marquee is shining brightly on Salina Street. And that project is completed. We're now working with the Landmark Theater to get that grant that they received from the state reimbursed, allow SEDCO to receive those funds back, and then just continue to loan out to small businesses. So the whole purpose of this, it does serve as our revolving loan fund, is that we can keep supporting for years to come businesses in the future.
And we had the flexibility because of the ARPA money and because of your intercession.
Yes.
Basically, to
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to speak to the longevity, is that the purpose of that too is for these loans that will be paid back. Now, some of them were forgivable as well, so the way we structured it is some of the loans would not have to be paid back by small businesses. That was really done intentionally, again, to assist with the economic hardship of the pandemic.
What's the forgivable amount?
So $5,000 is forgiven for what we've deemed as micro enterprise. If you have 10 or less employees, this included businesses that weren't able to take advantage of things like PPP through the SBA, the Payment Protection Program. So we were one of the first programs that was accepting newer businesses that launched after the pandemic. We saw so many businesses that had, unfortunately, the door was shut for them to take advantage of those programs in 2020 and 2021.
and it showed flexibility, obviously, because that was a new thing. COVID, nobody knew what was happening, and I have to compliment all of you on that, because that was really critical to help a lot of the businesses in that area. So.
I think one of the things we always are trying to do is listen and be responsive to what the business community needs. So we were pivoting and adapting these programs as we were launching them to help address things that we simply weren't aware of in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. So I think that really covers through what you're seeing before you with the activity indicators. I will just say this budget, we're placing particular emphasis on moving the needle on our business corridors, continuing to support entrepreneurs, including daycare businesses and others. And so, we think the year ahead is an exciting one for business development. We are adding to our team and growing our team, and we think, one, we desperately need the help because of the amount of movement we've seen in recent over the last 12 months. But yeah, we're certainly staying busy on the business side of the house. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
how many small businesses sprang up through COVID? Do you have that number?
So we don't have the capability to track it directly. Part of the reason why is that the city, ultimately, you can start and launch a business without the city being directly involved. However, if there's any licenses or any approvals that you need through the city, then ultimately we have the ability to track that. But for example, like getting a DBA or a doing business as, that goes through the county clerk's office. So there's just no single source of information that's easily attains how many businesses launched within a given year or period. What I will say is that we made particular emphasis with these programs we were launching on the businesses that were impacted the most through the pandemic. So a big one was gyms and fitness facilities. We know that they were required to close for such a long period of time and weren't able to reopen. Restaurants were dealing with capacity restrictions because of being in the orange zone, which Syracuse included for so long. So when we were launching these programs, it was, who are the businesses being hardest hit? How do we direct those funds in their direction?
Let me ask you, when you talked about the forgiveness of the grants,
Yeah.
so do they have to hit some benchmarks? Is this based on performance?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so essentially what we wanted to do, because the funding is provided up front, so what we're doing is, because of ARPA, we're documenting, here's what they're spending the money on, we're reimbursing them, or we're paying vendors on their behalf. But then we wanted to give a period where we could go back and make sure the business is remaining open. So one of the things that we expect you're being assisted with us, we want you to remain open and remain and retain the number of jobs you currently have. We were looking at taxes that were being paid to the city, water bills as well. So one of the expectations is that you're being assisted with this funding. Our expectation is that you will remain current on all those things. So as part of the program, the funding is provided up front, but then on the back end, the forgiveness takes place as long as you maintain the stipulations within this requirement. So every single business that's assisted, there's an agreement that they sign, and all of that information is included as part of the agreement. Yeah.
All right, councilors. So before I turn over to Michelle, realizing a quick correction, I had misspoke earlier. I've been saying codes was tomorrow. You all know that's Monday, but for the viewers at home, we can have it on record. That's Monday.
WCNY?
So on the neighborhood development side of things, what you have in the sheet in front of you is largely a reflection of the work that we're doing through our HUD entitlement program. So our typical kind of year-to-year CDBG, ESG home activity. So looking at emergency home repairs, those are things like sharp and urgent care that we run out with partners like Home Headquarters to facilitate that programming. Direct home buyer assistance, again, working very closely with Home Headquarters to do first-time home buyer education and down payment assistance. Looking at kind of rental housing units and vacant housing rehabbed. Again, that's very much kind of reflective of our typical year-to-year programs. And specifically kind of looking at projects, so like Smith Restaurant Supply is a big one that we brought on recently. Those types of kind of mixed income. And then additionally, our single family owner-occupied properties for first-time home buyers. Our output of that has looked kind of relatively consistent across the last couple budget years. I think the biggest places where we've kind of seen some differences here, looking at relocation assistance for households working with providers like Catholic Charities. We've had some increases that we were able to put into those budgets because of some of the different COVID special allocations that we've had, which kind of reflects what that increase looks like. The other big place that we kind of saw a bit of a decrease, understandably because of the impact of COVID, is within public services and individuals served, and that's largely reflective of our community center participants. So typically those numbers have been a bit higher in previous, if you would go back to 18, 19, would be a little bit higher, but understanding the impact of COVID and centers needing to have kind of a little bit more minimized programming, what they were able to do. Like I said, this is very much kind of just one aspect of the work that happens in neighborhood and business development. So our year-to-year allocations, a lot of the things that Michael highlighted at the beginning of this session in terms of kind of the work that we're doing with the land bank, the work that we're doing with community ambassadors and supporting interdisciplinary other divisions within neighborhood and business development is not being tracked here, but all of that work is still happening and kind of ongoing.
Other questions before we move on to the line item budget? Okay. So if we want to flip to page 133.
Maybe before we go on, I just want
Please.
to thank your new deputy commissioner, because I probably reach out to her probably on 5 or 6 times a week as far as issues with, everything's gone a lot smoother as far as the land bank goes, and, the taking of tax delinquent properties that affects our neighborhoods. So I appreciate all your efforts on that too.
I might as well pile on top with Counselor Hogan. I appreciate, Michelle, I don't get to you as much, but Eric, I blow his phone up, and Michael, I blow your phone up, and I do appreciate it, because the constituents that were coming, a lot of them, like Eric said, they were people that fell in under the radar when COVID hit. They had just opened up their businesses, and you did reach out and make it work for them. Michael, same thing with you, when we talked about some of the things that we had going on with different folks that was looking to do commercial stuff, you were right there to help. So I do appreciate you guys a ton for what you do. And Michelle, I'm coming for you.
No. Leave Michelle, because I call Michelle.
But it seems like any issue that falls in the gray area in any city department, it's your issue, Michael. I mean, it seems like everything is like you're the jackknife that fits all, everything. It's incredible.
It's really a cool position to be in. Honestly,
When you have those two on your side.
well, that's just it. If it was just me sitting here, it would be a very different story.
Can't let him get away either. We're gonna get you too.
I know. Text us your cell phone
While
number.
you sitting there, we're gonna get you too.
So, and I will say, as long as we're pointing to Jackie, so Jackie has been a one-man show since we've had a couple of retirements. If there's anybody at home that's watching that wants a job as an accountant and as a city resident, or if you know anyone, we're looking to refill his team. He has been
Money man, so we don't need to bother you.
Jackie's, since our longtime financial director, John Vavany's retired last year, Jackie had been the deputy. Jackie stepped up and has been absolutely astounding. So we are incredibly fortunate to have the team that we've got. The reason that I'm able to look competent is because of who I've got beside me and who's on all these teams. And so I don't take that for granted at all. It's really incredible. But I appreciate the fact that you all feel supported in the way that you do the work to support our constituents as well. So thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. So let's talk about how much it costs to actually do the support then, shall we?
Now we get into the money.
So our salaries here, so this is divided up a little bit. So there, as you know, there's more than $94,000 worth of salaries within the entire department. So do keep in mind that it's the 51,100 line, and then head on down to the professional services, the 415 line. Mm-hmm. That's really where you're seeing all the salaries included right there. And so this is, but then, we also, when we say less reimbursement from other funds, some of this shows here, some of this doesn't. So that's why, it depends on the funding source and where it fits in our budget.
Help me understand. So you said the salaries are in the professional services line?
So if we go back to why these salaries are that way in yesterday's SUR hearing.
Sheet,
I'm sorry, say again?
the sheet.
So the sheet, yes, exactly, right. So that's why that is billed over under professional services. And so what you'll see is a lot of these lines really look the same. Professional services grown. You all have been great advocates for us, and I've truly felt supported in the fact that every time I show up in front of you, the question is, Commissioner, do you have enough staff? Do you have enough people to do the work? Well, as you see that bar graph grow on what we passed out, we're at a point where we've needed a bit more staff. So we've gone from 26 up to 31 positions over the past year going into this particular budget. And we feel that you guys are able to see why when it comes to the amount of work that happens. But frankly, we're seeing healthy reimbursement on that as well. So where we have just over $1 million in the professional services line for those salaries, I will say included in that is it's not just salaries, it's mostly salaries, of course, as budgets always are. But that's where you've got the office supplies, the trainings. The TNT allocation sits within that amount as well. And then the less
Where
reimbursements.
does the TNT, Mike, sit, what allocation does it sit in with the professional?
Within the professional services.
Yeah, okay, because, you know, we deal with TNT quite a bit, and they seem to create a lot of neighborhood initiatives themselves, and I'm thinking they might deserve, that's 80,000?
So that's in the budget for 80,000,
Yeah,
Counselor.
they might deserve a little more money, considering what they've done over the past couple of years I've been on the council anyways.
Well, and Jimmy Monto is here representing TNT as well today,
Yeah,
since that's in the budget.
we appreciate your presence, Jim. Thank you.
So when we look at what it's going to take to do the work, it's going to take a little bit more. It's going to take a little bit more from when it comes to the FEC, when it comes to the lead, when it comes to a lot of the data that we pull, frankly, for not just for the stuff that you're interested in, but frankly for what we do to support codes and all the other departments. A lot of those data pulls come out of our department, so we've added some work there. The business loan manager position is new. The corridor manager position is new. This is the stuff where we are finally at a point, wonderfully, where we can make sure that this work is done more completely, more holistically, and has the attention that it deserves. So that's really where you're seeing the growth, and it's a pretty straightforward budget. I mean, we're a small department, so there's not a lot of other stuff in here. So I'll stop talking and see if there's anything else anybody wants to talk to.
Well, I think it's impossible almost, maybe it's something API can, is to quantify the revenue produced by your department when a house is put back on the tax rolls. You know, all the way from the, land bank to seizing the property for the city, to the land bank, and then to codes and to everything else as far as stabilizing our neighborhoods. I wonder if that could ever be measured in it anyway.
So that's the type of stuff that can be measured. It's the type of stuff that I would say we still, where we're having the staffing, there's still some challenges when it comes to the software and the programming that we have to be able to do it efficiently. So that's why we're always appreciative of the fact that you guys will give us a minute to answer questions. But there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And frankly, when you look at the housing development that we do, affordable housing, Commissioner OJ, our assessment commissioner, came across something the other day that was showing that the development of affordable housing actually increases the tax base, the value of the properties that are right around it. Cool. There's a lot of ways in which the work from this department manages to grow the overall economic condition for the city.
So the business corridors are something I think is really important, so I'm really interested in the idea of the new person doing that. So tell me a little bit about what type of background you're looking for someone and what their day-to-day will be. I'm not me.
I am
curious.
No, that's right, and I'm more than happy to talk about this one. So, I think when we think about business corridors and we look at opportunity, I think one of the very first steps is to look at where the city has the most control. Because we look at this from a code enforcement perspective, we look at properties that are privately held, and I think the city is looking to enforce and use everything at its disposal. But one of the things, especially in recent years, that NBD has gotten directly involved with is our infrastructure coordination. So it's one of the things that I was hoping we were going to have the chance to talk about, but we're doing a lot of cross-departmental collaboration when we look at road reconstruction, when we look at the amount of water lines, sewer lines, and I found myself in a lot of conversations with the amount of work we did last year in downtown Syracuse. I would say on a daily basis, I was speaking to business owners who were impacted by the work, and then what were the ways to address it? How soon was the road going to reopen? Why was their parking removed in front of their business, and how quickly could we respond? NBD was playing that role, and we're doing it not just downtown, but we're looking at business corridors as well. And so, our DPW and our infrastructure departments are now doing more than they did a number of years ago. We want to make sure that the businesses, the storefronts, residents who live on these corridors are directly aware of this and that we can coordinate effectively. We also know that if there are projects that are digging into the water main or digging in to make a lateral connection, let's do that proactively. I vividly remember last year we had a situation where a property downtown was getting ready to cut into the road, and if we didn't act accordingly, they would have cut in after we had just finished the work, or we would have fined them and and there would have been fees involved in order to do that. So we're trying to look at project schedules for private investment as well as where our road work is going in, and then that ultimately has public sector investment on the business corridor side, but then through our ARPA allocation and through the support of the council, we also have funds directly tied towards business corridor investment. So actually very soon you'll have information in your inbox, but we're going to be launching that program beginning next week that will actually be a grant allocated program for business corridors funded through ARPA. And so the position, ideally, this person will be directly involved in getting those projects off the ground, supporting the property owners that are assisted, and then making sure those projects are through to completion. So it's both coordination with our inner city departments on the work we're doing in corridors, but then also we want to try to be really focusing proactively on where are their investment opportunities. And I mentioned the $2 million ARPA fund because I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. It's going to be in real time. We're launching that right around the time this position will be filled. But in addition, we know there's state grants and state resources and federal funding. So essentially, if we have a property that's been a long time issue, if we have numerous code violations, we want to address it. We need to be proactive with the owner on how to redevelop it. Having a business corridor manager that's dedicated to these type of smaller scale developments, it's going to be a huge asset for us and certainly for me.
I know just anecdotally, and this is a small part of everything, but in North Salina Street, there used to be like the Little Italy flags, right? And I remember talking about it, and DPW was involved, but it's not a priority for DPW because they're doing a million other things, and so it's one of those things where there's not a champion within City Hall for a business corridor. So I think this will be good to have that. So
that's exactly right. So North Salina was a great pilot case because one of the things that we did last year is that we have an environmental maintenance crew that is also growing and expanding, but led by Andy Jacobowski and DPW's leadership. I mean, it's a great team. And so they were responsive to us as well. We had just litter, debris, things that were collecting on Little Italy's corridor. And you remember how many years ago all the additional brick pavers and all that infrastructure was made, but it had looked dated and there was a lot of debris that was kind of casting down on the rest of the corridor. We went in with Andy, we coordinated an early morning, Saturday morning cleanup. We did it one Saturday on one side of the street, and then we coordinated the other side on Saturday. We notified all the business owners and property owners so they were aware this was happening. Within about 3 hours on that Saturday, all that litter and debris was removed. We did it on both sides of the street, and we got great feedback to that. So that was just one example where NBD is leading that coordination, but doing it in concert with DPW and some of these other departments. And we're trying to do it and make sure that business owners actually see, this is your city tax dollars at work in order to create these types of improvements.
I would add on to that too, some of the work that the neighborhood planners do, it really gets to kind of the heart of the types of things that you're speaking to, Councilor Green. All of our neighborhood planners have kind of regular either residents or agencies that they're meeting with on a regular basis, kind of to talk about those types of projects that are really kind of smaller in terms of impact, but they're also low-hanging fruits and things that we can really, they don't require millions of dollars to do. So I know in that particular area, Jessica Vitzagera, prior to switching into the lead program role, she had a lot of ongoing conversations about flower hangers for North Salina Street. So all of that work is happening, and the planners are working very closely in concert with the business development team, with the goal being to really kind of coordinate these investments overall so that the impact is kind of felt in the commercial corridors and in the residential neighborhoods.
Can I ask about a corridor?
Sure.
That I feel is neglected? That Fayette Street corridor. When are we going to start taking a look up there?
Right,
or are we already looking up there?
Well, I only asked east or west Fayette?
East Fayette.
Okay.
East Fayette. When you go on Columbus and up that hill, it has,
Yeah. So what I can tell you is that by being able to have more capacity and more staff, I mean, this is essentially not just dedicated to the R&I corridors. We've kind of identified 10 of those priority areas, but this is meant to be for the commercial districts and commercial corridors that are high traffic but have not seen the same level of investment that downtown has. That is the priority and the reason why we're creating this position. And so I think we absolutely are looking north, south, east, and west on where there's opportunities, but I know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, because we've
what you're
touched
talking
all
about.
the other corridors, but that particular corridor has not been touched at all.
Yeah.
So, Council President, That neighborhood, when you look at Parkside Commons, Hilltop as well, Newitt, so both teams walked that neighborhood last summer, taking a look at what properties do we have control over, where are the problems, and also through the home team, the high occupancy monitoring enforcement team that Deputy Mayor Owens created last year. We've been in very close contact with the owners of Parkside Commons, and we've seen significant improvement in the way that Parkside Commons is itself maintained. So we are consistently looking at what we can do there. Land Bank a couple of years ago was able to take down a couple of vacant properties right there, and frankly, with the reactivization of Westmoreland Park that Councilor Driscoll was so instrumental in. We are incrementally being able to work towards that. But it's deeper than that, Commissioner, because I'm talking, if you go down Cherry, right, start at Cherry Street. Yep. And work your way up. In between there used to be businesses all up in that Columbus area, all up that corridor. There's nothing there, absolutely nothing. And Parkside Commons, good start. But we used to have two bakeries, dry cleaners, grocery stores. It was so much in that corridor. So I just would like to see a little revitalization. We would too.
They had one in business.
Who?
Victoria Restaurant.
Yeah, right at the corner.
Yeah, just
Yep.
little girls, little bullets.
I think to highlight your point really quickly with, I think as we look to the future of that area, I think when you have investment and projects that you can build on and leverage on, I think two of the ones that are coming to mind, councilors have had conversations around it. The former Cooper lithographics building, which is going to be redeveloped into the bread factory. This is a land bank owned property. It's being redeveloped into a whole mix of uses, and that is right off of Cherry, right off of East Genesee and East Fayette. That is one project that builds on investment in the neighborhood. The other one is the former Richmark Carpet Building, which is owned by Laura Cueva, who relocated her business from Utica to Syracuse, and the historic building that we're in the process of helping her redevelop. I think when you're beginning to see the needle move on some of these larger anchor buildings that have been vacant for far too long, you're changing the perception of these types of areas, and then other investors or other property owners are taking note. And then you're starting to see that's how that revitalization happens, one property, one block at a time. So I remain optimistic about that area, but you're absolutely right. It has not seen the investment that it's needed in decades. So.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, it's been administration after administration, and everybody just skips over that one. You just skip it over. So no.
We don't want to skip over anything. So.
No, and I'm not going to let you.
Any updates on the bread factory, Eric?
So they continue. They're working very closely with Caitlin Wright in the land bank. They have also been authorized for abatements through CITA. So CITA has authorized the project. They're just waiting to close. And also they had received New York State funding support as well. So I think one of the key things. They received the commitment from the state, and typically with most of the Regional Economic Development Council projects, you just have to complete it, and then the reimbursement comes on the back end. But they've been also looking at tax credits as well as the private financing, and I know they've been talking to several banks. But we've been in direct communication with that project. It's one we expect it to kick off and get off the ground soon.
But you remember how they say if you can see it, you can believe it, and I believe that because. If we could kind of sustain that quarter a little bit, some of that activity you see up there wouldn't be there because it would just transform that whole area. So we're looking for transformation.
Yeah, completely agree with you, and that's why it's that combination of and as we talked about during the land bank hearing this morning. It's that collective effort of what are we looking at when it comes to where people live and where people work within the same space.
Is the health center still operating up there?
Certainly not on a daily basis. I don't know that they're operating anything out of there at all right now.
They're doing some stuff.
Yeah, it's just not open like Monday through Friday. It's like.
Because think about it. If you could bring that health center up and bring up real commercial buildings up through that corridor, that would be thriving.
While we're speaking of that quarter, what's the destiny of the fire station center over there? Do we know?
So, well, it is city-owned. So we, a lot of the city-owned real estate efforts are done in coordination both with NBD, but with assessment and with the law department and other, and of course, working with the mayor's office. So the fire stations, I mean, any of these property real estate opportunities, we're directly talking to the fire department about the long-term strategy there. So the firehouses absolutely are under discussion. And really, we're just continuing to evaluate what impact does that have on city services for any properties that we're looking to sell or put up for sale, so that continues to be an ongoing discussion. But we know, a vacant firehouse, it's not contributing to the neighborhood. So that's why we're trying to advance what the future of these city-owned sites are.
To be clear, we also totally defer to the fire chief on that one.
Okay. Any further questions?
I have a quick question about your page here. And the 22, 23, the light blue or white bar, the other state-funded program, and that got increased, and what is that a reflection of?
ARPA.
Yeah, DRI is the big bump, so downtown revitalization.
Okay, got it.
Dollars. The other sources that were kind of the regular reoccurring that we were looking at within that would have been the Cities Rise grant, which we've talked about, the Zombies grant that we've been administering over the last couple of years, and then AHC to fund new construction.
All right. Well, thank you guys. If there's no further questions, then we can adjourn this meeting.